Hey everybody, welcome to Blood in the Void Part 2. We're going to continue on with deck levels, which is shipboard battlefields. We talked about ship vaults in the first video, which is the video right before this one. So this is just one of the pages, sample pages they show you on Games Workshop's website for the book on the inside, so we can look at the cover again. I thought it was appropriate, it has a spaceship and all that. Excuse me. Deck levels, pretty much in between the major bays and vaults of any large vessel are labyrinthian sublevels and decks, often filled with tangled corridor networks, small chambers, and holes that can, pretty much be a bad place to fight. Putting together a deck level board can require a little more effort than usual, as it is made up of confined spaces. To give you an example, I looked up something on the web. I think it's from the Space Hulk. It's from some board or some website, but you can kind of see in there. You can see pretty much using the mouse. This is a hallway that goes up like this, so and down around, and here this is a wall. This is a wall. Hallway, different hallways. Like a room, corridor, hallways and corridors and rooms and hallways and stuff. So if this was the entire table, you can see really limited playing on these hallways and rooms, which is what they're trying to get at. So let's just put this back, okay? You may already have a set of tiles or boards suitable for this in your collection if you happen to have a copy of Space Hulk, for example. If you don't, the simplest thing to do is get a hold of some card or thick paper and create a number of corridor and room sections to play on. Individual corridors should be no less than 2 inches wide and 6 inches long to allow for the passage of miniatures, while rooms and chambers should be larger than this, and each quarter of the board should have at least 1 or 2 large chambers, and perhaps twice the number of corridors in order to make things interesting. Each table edge should have 1 or more points of ingress into the playing area, basically corridors or chambers that terminate at the edge of the board. These are the avenues from which reserves may arrive during play. Scattered terrain such as barrels, barricades, small pieces of machinery, crates, etc. are excellent for use in chambers, scattered terrain being these small little pieces of terrain, while bulkhead doors are best for corridors. When laying out a deck level from scratch, it's often easier to place the rooms and chambers first and link them up with corridors until you're happy with the end result. You can either just lay out the deck level in a mutually agreed fashion between the players, using an impartial third party to lay it out, or agree a total quantity of chambers and corridors and take it in turns, each laying out the chambers and connecting the corridors and so on, making sure that every table quarter has at least one exit leading off it, to come back on for our reserves and stuff. Because of the confined spaces involved, deck level layouts are better suited to smaller games, and models with large bases are going to have problems. With a total of a maximum of 25 models a side recommended. Experienced players may also wish to ignore the standard unit coherency rules for this kind of game, each unit in essence being treated as a squad of a single model. If this is the case and kill points are being used, assume that each model is worth a single kill point except independent characters and walkers, which are worth 5 kill points each. There are a great many more layers of detail you can add to deck level games if you wish, such as incorporating a deck level alongside a vault, or even outer hull board in a big multiplayer game. You can add elements such as deadfalls and swing bridges or stairwells and elevators, the latter allowing you to play in quote-unquote 3D with several smaller deck layouts constituting a stack of vertically adjacent decks. Excuse me. If you find yourself enjoying this web game, don't be afraid to experiment a bit. Before I continue, I just want to say this is one of my favorite styles that they offer, because it is really different. You can do it kind of 2D. Now, I don't mean 3D and 2D in terms of having multiple levels on top of each other, but just using tiles. That's kind of like a 2D approach. There's no walls to get in the way of moving miniatures and stuff. What I really do want to do eventually, and what I like, what I've seen from people doing it, and I like the idea, is you make actual terrain for deck level combat. Semi-modular hallway and corridors, using Seas of Death, plastic card, maybe some Hearst art molds and whatnot. Basically, the whole idea being you actually build up if there's walls, there's actually walls there. And it makes it a little harder in moving the models, so you have to do it with some leeway. Let's say you want to make it so it's one Terminator can fit down the entire hallway and that's it. You might want to make it a little bit wider, like obviously you want to make it wide enough so the base can go through it. Maybe even a little bit wider than the standard breathing room, just to make it a little bit easier to move the models around in the hallways, just as an example. But probably my favorite concept. As far as limiting yourself to 25 models or so being maximum, I would say you can get away with slightly larger, maybe make it a little bit larger board, and maybe changing the number of turns instead of, if you have a big board, full 4x6, let's say, with lots of corridors and rooms, you can experiment through playtesting with some friends before you do like an event. Maybe instead of 5 to 7 turns, you have 10 to 14 turns, stuff like that, depending on the size and all that. And if you think 25 miles is kind of small, well, I think they're talking more about that in terms of Space Marine models. My entire Deathwing army is 25 models strong, so of 1850. So you could probably build a very elite force with that many models for Space Marines. Chaos. Some of the more horde type armies may have a problem, but again, experimenting, seeing how many models, like trying full on 1500 points versus 1500 points, see how it goes. You can also make corridors to be wide enough to let a dreadnought through, like the hallways and stuff. But not all of them. Maybe have 1 or 2 in the entire map. That way they can do some movement and have some fun that way. And then have big rooms and stuff. You can also mix and match, which I'll get into in another video at another time. Anyway, moving right along. The last shipboard battlefield is Outer Hull. Pretty much the ship's outer hull skin can itself form a battlefield, trying to force a breach into the ship's hull. In boarding action of this kind, the outer hull surface of the ship forms the battlefield you are playing on, with attackers seeking either to force airlocks or breaches inside or damage vital structures on the hull surface. Terrain on an outer hull table should be sparse, covering no more than a quarter of the table in footprint in total, and should be made up of large rectangular structures and objects along with antennae, gun towers, and other forms of machinery representing the ship's systems. Obviously, no natural terrain or anything loose to the ground should be used. Now, this may sound kind of funny, but this can also be used to represent things like, aside from ships in outer space, maybe a floating large fortress that you're trying to gain access into, or a floating large complex, or something in atmosphere as well. I'm sure to change some of the rules that it says in here, or a roving giant land train you're trying to gain access into, something like that. It's not just use the imagination a bit. Anyway, special rule: the Hungry Stars. This is for stuff that's in outer space. When fighting on a ship's outer hull, the Cold Void special rules are always in effect. In addition, any blast attack that causes a pinning check may instead have a chance of sending its victim spinning helplessly into the void. Instead of causing a pinning test, any model caught in a blast which survives must immediately roll equal to or under their strength on a d6, or be removed as a casualty. A roll of a 6 is always counted as a failure. Jump infantry may re-roll this test if failed. Interesting idea. Rather than using the full boarding rules represented here, in large games you may wish instead to use the rules from the Planet Strike expansion instead to represent a major assault against a colossal star vessel or space station's outer hull. Play a Planet Strike game as normal, but apply the Hungry Void and Catastrophic Damage rules as shown here, but be warned this will make for a spectacularly lethal and anarchic way to play 40k. So you can use the outer hull stuff, but play a game of Planet Strike on it. So that's all the battlefield types. Now let's look at the boarding assault mission. Special rules using the catastrophic damage table. Both players roll a d6 at the start of the mission. If the total result of the 2 dice is 7 or more, in this area the ship has been being fought for, I should say, has been exposed to the vacuum already, and the Cold Void special rules in effect. You don't have to do this either. If either of the dice has rolled a 6, the lighting in the area has failed or been shut down, and the night fighting rule is also in effect. So you can kind of make and match play with it here, do whatever you want. You can have objectives, depending on the mission goals. For scoring units, troops or elites count as scoring. Variable game length, wipeout, if you pretty much table your opponent, you win. Deployment. Before the game begins, both sides should divide their forces into roughly 2 equal groups based on the number of units. They must then decide which of these 2 forces is to be their spearhead and which is to be their reserve. This arrangement represents an attacking force working its way through the ship and the ship's defenders rallying to meet them. The gaming table is then divided into 4 quarters, and both players roll off to choose a deployment zone. The winner then picks which is to be their deployment zone and deploys their spearhead force anywhere in the ship area but not within 6 inches of the center of the board. Well, anyway, in this area, not the ship area, because it's quartered, basically. The other player then rolls a d6. On a roll of a 4+, they may choose any of the 3 remaining areas in which to deploy their spearhead. Otherwise, they must deploy their spearhead in the area opposite that of their opponent. Reserves arrive normally, entering the board from any table edge in their player's deployment zone. We're using... does it say here? This is using the vault type of battlefield terrain setup. You can modify this to do the other ones if you want to. Mission goals, you roll a d6. You either mutually agree or roll a d6. On a 1 or 2, it's search and destroy. 3 and a 4 is force to breach, and 5 and a 6 is sabotage. Search and destroy is kill point based, pretty much annihilation. Force to breach, defender plays 3 objectives, 1 in their own deployment zone, 1 in each of the zones in which neither player has deployed. These objectives may not be placed within impassable terrain or less than 6 inches away from the table edge. So you have to be 6 inches or more away from the table edge. If the attacker is in control of more objectives than the defender at the end of the game, they are the winner. If any other result is the case, the defender is the winner. Then you have sabotage. The defender places D3 plus 2 sabotage objective markers on the table. These markers represent control panels and system junctions vital to this area of the ship. The marker may be placed anywhere on the table other than within 6 inches of the table edge or 12 inches of each other. They may not be placed in impassable terrain. Basically, the attacker must attempt to destroy each of these objectives by any means they can. They have an armor value of 11 and will be destroyed on any successful glancing hit or penetrating hit on them. Because their tactics cannot be certain of destroying them properly at distance, these objectives count as having a 4+ invulnerability save against any shooting attack or blast damage they suffer and cannot be harmed by events like catastrophic damage table, because that would be cheap. At the end of the game, the attackers gain 1 victory point for each sabotage objective destroyed, and the defender 1 victory point for each sabotage objective still on the table. The side with the most victory points is the winner. If you draw it out, you draw it out. Now you can have boarding assault stratagems, which is an optional rule. Pretty much there's different types of stratagems: general, attacker, and defender. You can also find different stratagems in both the Planet Strike and Cities of Death books, expansion books, intended for use in those games, which you can modify or use where appropriate in your boarding assault games. And you can of course make up your own by mutual agreement of both parties playing. Unless specified in the description, each stratagem may only be taken once per force. Stratagems have points, so some stratagems may cost 1 point, some may cost 2, some may cost 3. Pretty much, in a boarding assault mission, it is recommended that each side has an allowance of 1 stratagem point, plus an extra 1 stratagem point for every full 500 points of their force. So a 1,000 point boarding force would have 3 stratagem points to spend. You get the idea? Declare the use of them. Some of them may require special terrain. In the case of them requiring special terrain, they have an armor value of 10, and it will be destroyed if it suffers a glancing or penetrating hit. If this occurs, roll d6, and a result of a 4+, it explodes d6 inches, inflicting a strength 3, no AP hit, and anything caught in the blast. Some may give you extra units. They are temporary allies, basically. They do not score or anything like that, and you can't really give them any special rules that anybody may have. They're just there. Things that have special weapons and gear should be modeled onto your model. So I'm going to stop here. A little bit rushed, yes, but went off on a little tangent. And lastly, the third video will be the boarding assault stratagem, starting with the general stratagems, then the attackers, and then the defenders. And then that's it for Blood in the Void. So hope you've been enjoying, and until next time, take it easy.